Hi everyone and welcome. Today I will be talking about all of the books that I managed to finish in October, and then towards the end of the video I will very quickly mention the books that I will be reading in November for sure. So if you're looking for a buddy read and any of those books appeal to you, then definitely let me know. Now for October I think that I had a pretty good reading month. I managed to finish 5 books in total, and although that's not anywhere near what I used to finish in any given reading month, it is the best result that I've had since the start of my reading slump, so somewhere around June, and the second half of October actually went a lot better than the first half, so I'm well pleased. As far as the type of books that I've read, I don't think that anybody is surprised that all 5 were adult fantasy books. 2 of them I listened to on audiobook, 2 were physical reads, and then 1 was a mashup of everything. I listened to it on audiobook while driving to work, I had immersive reading sprints, and then I also just read the physical book. So that was everything, but it's nice 50-50. So I will be going over these books from the ones that I finished first to the one that I finished last, which was just yesterday. The first book that I finished was Fire and Blood by George R. Martin. I will not be saying too much about this one because I actually have a full spoiler-free review for that, a dedicated one that is either going up this Saturday or next Wednesday. I haven't decided yet. But I'm so happy to be back in George R. R. Martin's world, in the world of Westeros, because it has been a while since I've read my favorite series of all time, A Song of Ice and Fire, and I am actually going to reread that one starting in 2023 together with a bunch of other amazing booktubers, so if you want to join us, definitely do so. But it was nice to just be back in that world and get all excited to pick up A Song of Ice and Fire again. This, of course, is fictional work, but it is written as a history book in the world of Westeros, and it was just really nice reading about the Targaryen dynasty, especially while also watching House of the Dragon, because I was watching that show. I absolutely loved it, by the way. So having a little bit of inside knowledge, knowing what was to come, but then also see how the writers of the TV show put a spin on some things was really nice. So yes, very happy that I listen to this one because this one was an audiobook, and I also think that the narrator here really helped because, especially with history books, it's nice if it feels like an old teacher is actually telling you that story and he's giving you a history lesson, and that really was the feeling that I got when I listened to Simon Vance, I think was the narrator. Then next up I finished a physical read, and that was Kushiel's Chosen by Jacqueline Carey. This was a book that I picked up probably in June or July, and then the reading slump hit me, and this is definitely a pretty difficult book to get through, I wouldn't say, but there's a lot of information. This is real high epic fantasy. There's a lot of political intrigues happening. There are a lot of names that you need to remember. So if you're in a reading slump, this is probably not the best book to pick up. But beginning of October, I started again and I basically flew through this book, which is, it's almost 700 pages. It's fun, it's tiny, it's a big book, but I loved it. Kushiel's Dart, which I picked up earlier this year, was a surprise all-time favorite now, so I had very high hopes for Kushiel's Chosen, and I actually don't know which one I like more. I am a sucker for firsts in a series because I love to get to know the world, to get to know the characters, but somehow I enjoyed this one equally to Kushiel's Dart. The political intrigue was still top-notch, I still really loved the main character, and I feel like if you loved the first book, you will love this one, but if you didn't really like the first book, I don't think that this is going to change your opinion, because it's more of the same thing. As always, I also really enjoyed Jacqueline Carey's writing style. She's definitely an author who uses more words than she needs to just to flower things up and to make it prettier, but I'm a sucker for those types of things as well, so I actually really enjoyed that here. Now, I do hope that I will be able to pick up the last book of this first trilogy, the Phaedra trilogy, before the end of the year. But I actually don't know if that's going to happen because it's not on my fall TBR, and like I said, these books are absolutely massive. But who knows? And otherwise, I do have something to look forward to next year. Then I finished another audiobook. This was an end of the series, so I'm quite happy with that I finally completed a series after months of just only picking up firsts and barely making any progress in series, and that was Blood of Dragons by Robin Hobb. This is of course the 4th book in the Rainwild Chronicles, which is the almost last series of the Realm of the Elderlings. I know that a lot of people are not a fan of this quartet in the Realm of the Elderlings. They think that this is the weakest work. A lot of people even don't read it. They just skip it. They DNF the first book and they go into the Fitz and the Fool trilogy. I actually really enjoyed this series nonetheless. I knew what I was expecting, I suppose. I knew that a lot of people didn't love it. So going in, I had my expectations lowered. I knew that this was probably not going to be an all-time favorite series, and although I agree that this is not the same quality as the other sub-series of the Realm of the Elderlings that I've read up until this point, I still quite enjoyed it. I don't think that it should have been a quartet. It could have been maybe a little bit shorter. There were definitely some scenes that I didn't really care for and that could have been swept over a little bit faster. But the ending, as always, Robin Hobb's endings of a trilogy are amazing. That was definitely true for the Life Ship Traders trilogy. This one takes place at the same part of the world, and I felt like this ending definitely increased my enjoyment of the overall series. So all in all, still a good series. It's still Robin Hobb, but it's not at the same level as the other series that she has written in the realm of the Elderlings. But one that I would definitely say pick it up and read it, because DNFing this one, I felt like there was quite some important information in this sub-series that you would have missed out, and I think that you definitely need to. So even if you really hate it and you decide to DNF it, look up a summary or something like that, because I wouldn't go into the Fitz and the Fool trilogy without having the knowledge of this one. And all in all, it did open up the world even more. It gave us a little bit more background about the dragons in this world. So I wouldn't DNF it, to be honest, and I still think that it's a fine series all in all. Lastly, it's not lastly, I still have 2 books to talk about. I'm no longer used to having more than 3 books on my wrap-up, apparently. But the next book that I read was a little bit of a mashup of that physical read, audiobook, immersive reading. And that is A Little Hatred by Joe Abercrombie. This is the first book in the Age of Madness trilogy in his bigger First Law universe. And I didn't really know what to expect here, because I liked the original trilogy, but I didn't love it. And then the standalones were hit and miss. I really disliked Best Served Cold. I think that that's probably my least liked book that I've read so far this year. Maybe. Now I'm thinking about a couple of DNFs. It's not my least liked book, but it's definitely one that is on my dislike pile, to be honest. And then we had The Heroes, which I did enjoy, and then we had Red Country, which I absolutely loved. So I didn't really know what to expect, especially because I knew that there was going to be some industrialization in this book, and I usually don't like my fantasy to be too modern. However, I really enjoyed this one. In this Age of Madness trilogy, we actually look at the next generation of the people that we've met in the original First Law trilogy, and I loved these new characters. I definitely think that Joe Abercrombie has improved in characterization over these. This is the 7th book that he's written, or the 8th book if we count the short stories that he's written in this world, and you can see that he has improved in certain things, but all in all, it's more of the same thing. So if you liked everything that comes before, you will like this. And I also liked this industrialization, which I was a little bit afraid of, as I said before, but I actually think that he did a great job. And some of the passages here, I really felt scared for the characters, which is something that I haven't really felt before in a Joe Abercrombie book, so definitely thumbs up for that. Now, I actually had a completely spoiler-filled discussion for this one together with Jose, Raf, and Steve. This was on my channel. I will link it in the description box down below. Unfortunately, Steve really didn't like this one and he DNF'd it, and I can see why, because he wasn't in love with the standalones. He thought that the original trilogy was just fine. So like I said, it's more of the same thing. If you don't like the very typical writing style of Joe Abercrombie, if you don't like how he does characters and how he uses the same sentence over and over again to create a certain character, then yes, this is definitely happening here. But if you like the humor, if you like that, and if you almost, I don't know how to say it, but if you like the way that he writes certain scenes, then this is definitely top notch. So I cannot wait to read the 2nd and the 3rd book for the rest of the year, and then finish my First Law journey by the start of 2023. So that's definitely going to be a big series that I can cross off. And then the last book that I finished actually yesterday, this was a physical read, and that is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is Dark Academia. I actually thought that I've never read Dark Academia before, but apparently I have read The Picture of Dorian Gray, and I've also read the Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. So I have read 2 Dark Academia ones before. I really enjoyed The Name of the Rose, but this was over a decade ago that I've read it, and I think that I didn't really grasp everything that I should have grasped as, at that point, a 17-year-old. And then The Picture of Dorian Gray I read this year, and I hated it. That's probably the book that I hated most of all, not Best Served Cold. But this one was a Dark Academia one. It's fantasy, and it's definitely a little bit out of my comfort zone, because even though it's fantasy, this one takes place in Yale, it takes place in our time, and it is Dark Academia. So we follow a girl who is part of these veiled houses. So these are almost sorority clubs, but they deal with the supernatural, and then a murder happens, and she is on this investigation to see if one of these houses is actually responsible for this, or if it's just a freaky murder that happened in Yale. It can happen as well. I actually really enjoyed this one. I didn't know what to think. I know that this is the first in the series and that the second one is coming out in January, if I'm not mistaken, so actually perfect time to pick this one up. I also just wanted to pick it up because it's Halloween, and if I was ever going to read this one, then it should be now, I suppose. But I know that a lot of people who like Leigh Bardugo's other works actually dislike this series, and vice versa. I've never read anything by her, but at the very least I knew that it had some mixed reviews. So I didn't know what to expect, but I really loved it. I think that this is one of those books that I need to have in my TBR more, instead of all of the more traditional fantasy, the epic fantasy, the fantasy set in medieval time periods. We know the drill. I read almost exclusively that, but having something that is not too far out of my comfort zone, still connected to the fantasy world, but just a little bit different and fresh is just an ideal palate cleanser. So I will definitely be picking up the second book, because all in all I just had a great time. I maybe had like some instances or some passages that I felt my attention waning, but it was only maybe less than a handful of times. And the ending was definitely something that made me want to pick up the sequel as soon as possible. So yes, a surprise that I actually liked. So now I need to see if there's more dark academia like this. If you have any suggestions, definitely let me know, because now I am invested. Then, things are falling around me right here, but the books that I plan to read in November. So if you don't know, I have actually a seasonal TBR, and I uploaded this one a couple of weeks ago. I will definitely put that in the description box as well if you're interested. That are 15 books that I want to read before the end of the year. But I have added a couple. So a video that I will also link in the description box down below was one where I wanted to start a new series, and I was reading the first chapter of 8 different books, and then the one that I like the most, the one that appealed to me, that's the series that I'm going to start. And this is the book that I am going to start today. That is The Crystal Cave by Mary Stewart. This is an Arthurian legend retelling. It's the first one in a trilogy, but I do think that there are 2 other books after that trilogy, which are set in the same world, maybe follow some secondary characters, I don't really know, but I know that the original one is a trilogy. I really like the first chapter here. We follow Merlin when he's just a young boy. He's actually the bastard of a princess, and his grandfather is really mean to him, but his uncle seems to be a nice guy. That's all that I've read, but of course I had Fitz flashbacks, and I was a little bit biased choosing this one. I'm actually going to have a vlog for this one because I have 5-star prediction feelings right now, so let's see if that actually holds true. Then, of course, I just talked about A Little Hatred and that I am reading 1 book per month together with Jose and Raf at this point, because Steve, he's out. He didn't really like that first book, but that does mean that I will be picking up The Trouble with Peace in November. I will try to do the audiobooks because I really like the audiobooks. Stephen Pacey is probably, yes. I always forget his name, but I think that's Stephen Pacey, but he does a great job with these audiobooks, so I will be picking those up if I get my hands on The Trouble with Peace at the very least. And otherwise, it will be a physical read, but audiobooks is the way to go with The First Law. If you're still not sure, if you want to start and you don't know, would I give the audiobooks a try? Definitely do so, because just your enjoyment will be more. I think the humor really shines through when you listen to the narrator. So this is one that I will be picking up towards the end of the month. And then I have one on the TBR that I actually was not expecting to have on the TBR because it's not part of the 15 books that I have on my fall TBR. But I quickly realized that I almost have no audiobooks on that fall TBR. I have the First Law trilogy and then I have the Dandelion Dynasty series, but everything else is a physical read. So I needed to have more audiobooks. Decided to start the last trilogy in the realm of the Elderlings, which is of course the Fitz and the Fool trilogy, starting with Fool's Assassin. I am maybe 100 pages in, less than 10% at the very least, so not even 100 pages, and all the feels, just getting back to Fitz, to his life and seeing what happened in the meantime. I'm going to cry probably once I finish The Realm of the Elderlings. Luckily, there's always a reread, but I cannot wait to read more of these books. So yes, this audiobook is definitely happening. So those are the 3 books that I will for sure be reading in November. And then, of course, the other ones that I will get to, hopefully, I do plan to read more than 3 books, will be from that fall TBR. So if you haven't seen that video yet, you can watch that one right here. Please let me know in the comments down below what you have been reading in October and if you had a great time. Maybe you picked up some dark academia as well. As always, I hope that you enjoyed this video and see you next time. Bye!